give yourself the first moments of the day, even if it's 15 minutes, even if it's 30 minutes, whatever you can do, and allow yourself that time to set your foundation. But we have to give it to ourselves. And even if it's a simple, like 5 minutes to just breathe and to maybe remind yourself of who you are and where you're going, read your future biography, read some sort of manifestation statement, read your goals that you have for yourself, and get yourself in that vibration of who you are growing into. It makes it so that you subconsciously, without thinking, will make choices throughout the day that support this version of you.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Welcome to the Good Space Podcast. Today, we're welcoming an incredibly special guest, Danika Brysha. She's a wellness entrepreneur, body positive fashion model signed with IMG Models, and a self-care and lifestyle design coach. While leading her 3 companies, Self-Care Society, Model Meals, and Danika Brysha Inc., and modeling for such brands as Bare Minerals, Land's End, Old Navy, and Target, she guides others to find the wellness routines that create the foundation for the life they dream of. She's worked with thousands of people to spread wellness and cultivate self-care routines and systems that stick, something we're huge fans of here at The Good Space. And she's passionate about empowering others to come back home to themselves. Through her own journey of recovery from disordered eating, food addiction, body issues, excessive alcohol and drug use, deep debt, and an overall lack of confidence and purpose, Danika uses her own experience to help others transform and thrive. She's truly special because not only was she the first plus size model to represent women that weren't a size 0, she was literally on the forefront of that whole movement before it was even as big as it is now. But she's also pioneering the movement to build a business without burnout. You can actually watch her grow and build and continue to succeed as she's teaching and living what she's teaching. So she's truly a force to be reckoned with and someone you will want to learn from and watch change how we define success. So Danika, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Wow. Thank you so much for having me. That was such a nice intro. Thanks.
Yes. I mean, it's only true. And the more that I dug into your story and everything that you're doing, I was just in awe. And a guest that we had on before, Alex Ferguson, I think you knew each other when you both were in New York and, we're friends at the time. And she immediately, when I asked her who I should have on the show, she recommended you. And just the more I learned about you, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. Alex is great. We actually met, I think, in LA originally in the modeling industry. And so we were with an agency that was, sort of trying to shift the way that models were identified. It was just straight size and then maybe plus size, but no in between. And Alex was an in between. And so, yeah, we just connected then. So I'm so glad that she brought us together.
Same. What have you been the most surprised or happy about when it comes to your journey so far?
Oh, man.
Because you have so many different layers and textures to your story. And so I was just curious, what has been the most surprising or joyful thing that maybe you weren't expecting or you did expect and you're happy about? Or
wow, that's a big question. I love it. We're kicking it off right. The first thing that came to mind, I think, is really the foundation of what my ability to do the things that I do. And obviously that comes with a lot of support and teams and that sort of stuff. So I don't say that I'm doing all these things on my own, but is really self-care, right? And just how self-care system. I feel like I got lucky that I sort of fell into self-care, and I did fall into self-care as an effort to heal my disordered eating and food body relationship. That was kind of how I kind of fell into self-care and my sobriety. And I think that really set a foundation that had I not so desperately had to find that, I needed it to survive. If I hadn't found self-care and all the different ways of kind of staying accountable to myself, I don't know that I'd be here. And I definitely wouldn't be in this place, juggling all that I do. And so I think it's this biggest, most surprising thing is that just this act of taking care of yourself and having these routines and rituals, they don't have to take your whole day. They don't have to be super lengthy, can really support absolutely anything you dream of and anything you want to create.
It's amazing how that also can be seen in other aspects of life, right? The more simple and calm and like the small steps you can take, the actually bigger result you get. And I think that's so powerful. You recognize that. I think a lot of people can go through life not realizing that actually scaling back and taking care of yourself gives you bigger results and better results than forcing and pushing and being busy all the time.
Yeah, the slowing down to speed up is a big part of that. I think you just don't realize how much, I say self-care doesn't take time, it makes time. So when we take care of ourselves, we make a lot less mistakes. We make choices that serve us better. We're more intentional. We're more intuitive. And also one thing that really helped me as I was in recovery was this concept that I learned from the addiction programs, which is just like they say, take one sober day at a time, or one sober hour, or one sober minute, and you'll eventually create a sober life. And that concept can be applied from just the perspective of creating a great life. This idea that if I want to have a great life, I just need to figure out what's my recipe for a great day. So for me, I think I've sort of cracked that equation to a certain extent of what are the little intricacies of my day, at least at this stage of my life, and the self-care habits, and where do I take breaks, and what kind of work am I doing, and all these different pieces that when I look back and I string all those days together, it's a great life, right? Because that's what we all want. We want to create a great life, want to be happy, whatever. And so it's really just taking it down into something more manageable and digestible, which is something I'm really passionate about. I talk a lot about micro habits, just like keeping it simple and all of those little simple choices adding up.
I love that. And I actually had that quote down from somewhere else that I was reading one of your interviews about a great life is just a series of great days, which is just a series of great hours and moments. And that could not feel more true to me at this point. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because I've heard this quote before, but I don't know why it's only clicked now that like life is right now. It's not in the future. It wasn't in the past. It's not a someday or a sometime to like arrive at. It's right now, this second. So I really, really enjoyed that. I know that you mentioned as well in another interview that we have so much access to information, just tons of it, but the missing ingredient is integration, which is like the biggest thing at the Good Space is when we talk about habits and like actually integrating them, because there's a difference, right? So how do you teach people integration, or how do you make that easy for people? And what does that look like?
I've tried a lot of different things so I went on tour in 2018 with my partner. He's a chef, and we did a women's event series around self-care and wellness. And we did 66 events all over the country, lived in our RV, worked with thousands of women. And I had been sharing my tools. I was like sharing what was working for me, but it wasn't quite clicking. It was a little too complicated. It wasn't necessarily clicking for everyone. And I think that over the last, I guess it's been probably about 6 years that I've really been, 6 or maybe 8 years that I've really been sort of talking about self-care. And I've really only fell into that space because people saw my life transform really quickly. They saw me move out of my parents' garage. I lived in my parents' garage for 2 years. I'd gotten out of, I'd been in 6 figures of debt, all these things. And so people just started asking questions. And I realized that the tools and the practices that I was using, that I created for myself, were really helpful, and I should not hoard them for myself. And so, you talk to people and you realize there's, it's just about creating something that's accessible. And for me, the way that I stay accountable is I created something called my self-care checklist. And I created this while I was living in my parents' garage. And it was this way to hopefully get to the end of the day and not binge eat 10,000 calories in secret, because that was my drug of choice at the time. I was just checking little boxes saying, I eat, sleep, journaling, meditation, just a few of the little self-care things that I knew helped me. And I realized that just the accountability of checking those boxes made such a massive difference than me just saying, I know I should meditate and I should get good sleep, but there wasn't a system for it. And the self-care checklist kind of evolved into a more complicated self-care checklist that involved like affirmations and a lot of manifestation exercises and a lot of just positive mindset stuff. And that has been one of the most impactful things in my journey. Is like, I do a lot of the woo-woo stuff. And I know you're spiritual, it works, and thankfully people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, are giving us a little bit more science behind it now. So it doesn't feel so out there, but that stuff really works. And what I realized was, just like we go to the gym every day, or not go to the gym, but just like we want to move our body every day, just like we want to hydrate every day, self-care is the same thing. And especially these mindset practices is the same thing. It's not something we do once a month or a couple times a year, or when it's the new year where we manifest or we, work on self-love and that sort of thing. It needs to be practiced every single day, which is why I started Self-Care Society last year. It'd been an idea in my head forever, but we wanted to bridge that gap between knowledge and integration. So we built a platform where people can come just like they would come to a fitness membership and take a class, where they can take these quick self-care classes and do these sorts of exercises that help us dig a bit deeper and actually integrate this work that's so important and so impactful.
That's so many good things you've said. I'm like, I want to pull out everything and just like dive deeper. But yes, Self-Care Society, if you're listening and you have not heard it yet, definitely check it out. We'll make sure to link it in the show notes, but it's really an incredible platform. And you're exactly right. It's like the Mind Body app where I can go get a yoga class or something else. And like, I could, but it's more like the spiritual and the mindfulness. It makes it so easy because I feel like accountability can be so powerful, especially in those beginning stages when these habits might not be a habit yet, right? It might not be automatic. And it's also just wonderful to have that support. So thank you for making something like that, because I think it's so needed. But I did want to pull out a few things that you had said earlier. So when you were talking about the habits, you kind of like did a self-reflection, right? Initially. So I think it's super important to point out that a lot of this change that people are seeking, it just requires asking the right questions and then being willing to look at yourself and be aware rather than being on autopilot. And I know that seems like so small and like maybe insignificant to some people, but the fact that you asked questions about what you were doing and then really became aware of like every little thing that you did, do you feel like that was really the catalyst for being able to make this like lasting change?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the foundation for so many people when it comes to healing and creating a life that they love. And it's a foundation of Self-Care Society. It's why we call, the people who teach our classes we don't call them teachers or coaches, we call them guides. And the whole premise is, and this is when, in my journey as well, the premise is leading people back to themselves. Because I think when I got sober in 2014, I did a Whole30, which for me was incredibly impactful because I think for so long I had operated on foods that had given me brain fog and a lack of clarity. And I feel like without changing what I was consuming and fueling my body with, my brain, I had been diagnosed with ADHD, all these things. So I didn't have the capacity to do some of this deeper work that caused a lot of revelations about my life and what I desired, and kind of got me into journaling. And journaling for me was huge. Like journaling was this gateway to my inner world. And ultimately what I've realized on my journey is that like, it wasn't that I was missing anything. It was that I was not creating space to listen in. Like I always say, like you have your answers inside of you. You just have to create space to listen. And I think that's the biggest challenge, right? Is because we've all grown up in this world where we're taught to seek advice everywhere else and seek answers everywhere else. And I always try to remind people to seek you can be inspired by everything. And that's great because what that does is sparks our internal creativity. But we have to seek our answers inside of us, and we have them. But so many people have been, by whether it's the marketing, advertising industry, whatever it is, we've been conditioned to think that we can't trust ourselves to make choices that support us. So we need everyone else's opinion, or we need this gadget or this thing. And, I think what it comes down to is reinstilling self-trust into people so that they can trust that when they make choices that they are right for themselves, and then that we can respect that people should make choices for themselves, and that it might not always be the choice that we're going to make for ourselves. So I actually don't remember what the question was, but somehow it got me here.
No, I love that. It's okay. We're just flowing with where the conversation takes us. But for someone who is listening and maybe they feel like they can't really get out of the flow of the world. So like either they're working for someone else or they have a family or they're just really busy. How would you, because this has been on my mind a lot lately too. Like what we're doing doesn't flow with the world. It doesn't flow with how everyone's taught to you. So like, how do you manage maybe some of the pushback or even just your own, like, if you have shame triggers or guilt triggers and you're like, maybe I should be trying to be more relevant and act like these other brands, or maybe whatever, like, how do you stay grounded and centered in what you're supposed to bring forward?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. I think that like space is a word I like really love this word space. And I think that it's really hard when we are in the hamster wheel and we are busy, 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 and we can't pause and listen. It's really hard to get out of it if we cannot pause. And I understand how challenging that is. You think about people who are parents and working full time and navigating, there's so much. And I would say like the first thing that came to mind as you asked this question for me was the morning time. And I decided, I think kind of earlier on my self-care journey, and especially now as an entrepreneur and I have so many responsibilities and I have so many people needing me for things. I had to find a way to prioritize me. And for me, the way that I do that is first thing in the morning. And what that looks like as someone running multiple companies, one of them, a lot of people on the East Coast as well. And I'm on Pacific time. So I'm already getting a late start most days, is that I wake up really early and I don't sacrifice sleep because sleep is a huge piece of the puzzle, right? So it's just, I decided that I needed to go to bed earlier. And that's like one of the biggest self-care choices you can make. It's like plug the phone in across the room, stop scrolling and go to bed earlier. And it sounds simple, but what that does is it first you need a decent night's sleep, which, I know people are challenged with, but it's so important. And give yourself the first moments of the day, even if it's 15 minutes, even if it's 30 minutes, whatever you can do, and allow yourself that time to set your foundation. For me, that has been absolutely huge. And I promise you, I work with so many women that started as 5 minutes and maybe stretch to 15 minutes. So it does not have to be this huge thing, but we have to give it to ourselves. And even if it's a simple, like 5 minutes to just breathe and to maybe remind yourself of who you are and where you're going, read your future biography, read some sort of manifestation statement, read your goals that you have for yourself and get yourself in that vibration of who you are growing into. It makes it so that you subconsciously, without thinking, will make choices throughout the day that support this version of you. And I think that's what really worked for me was, it's not one specific thing. It was just that every day I reminded myself of who I was becoming. And as a result, if something came to me that didn't align with who I was becoming and who I kept convincing myself I was, even if the physical surroundings didn't show it, I started making choices and showing up as that version of me, and slowly but surely grew into it. And I don't know, like the boundaries around that come kind of naturally. I think when you start really identifying with the version that you want to be, I think that it's not as there's not as much of a need to manually make choices and changes. It almost just kind of flows naturally because that's your identity. And James Clear has a book, Atomic Habits, and he talks a lot about that with habit change, right? Like this idea that we have to not just change the habit, we have to change our identity around who we think we are. And I think that's a big piece of this is changing our belief about who we are. And naturally, the people that don't fit into that vision, the opportunities that don't fit into that vision, the way people treat you that don't fit into that vision, it sort of melts away if you can really own that vibrational energy and identity.
It's really great. I do love that book, by the way. It's really good. And I'm reading Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. So everything you're saying, I'm like, perfect. On the right track. Yeah, I love that because you're right. If you identify a certain way, then naturally you gravitate towards or let go of things that don't really help. And that kind of reminds me of just like emotional clutter, physical clutter. I think on your Instagram, you have been showing decluttering clips, right, in your house, which is amazing. And I think it's really cool to think of how like physical, like what you eat ties into the mental and emotional and spiritual, how your space also, like it's all connected. We're all connected in every aspect.
Absolutely. And, we're decluttering, doing my very best because our physical space has so much to do with it. And all of these elements do, and it's all connected, right? We know it's like, okay, I get a bad night's sleep and then I make food choices that don't serve me. And then I don't get my movement in because I'm tired and exhausted. And then I'm, not a good partner and I'm reactive to my partner because, my attitude is off and then I'm super stressed and I miss a deadline for work. It's like, it's so connected. It's all so connected. And that's why all these little choices really add up and you have to find a way to have them firing all together. And that doesn't mean you need to integrate all of them at once. If you're new to this, take one thing at a time. That's what I did for many, many years. Every month I added in a new sort of self-care challenge or micro habit challenge. And I would try it on, meaning I would decide every day for a month, I'm going to meditate and see how it impacts me. And gradually I just kept adding to this list, and those things became on autopilot because I did them long enough and didn't, it wasn't like I was doing for an hour at a time. It was 10 minutes or whatever. That gradually changed everything. And so I really think it has to do with how we show up and how we care for ourselves and who we believe ourselves to be and where we're going. And I talk a lot about the connection between self-love and self-care, because if we love something, we care for it. I always use the example of like your pets or your kids, or, think of someone you love and think of how natural it is. I want them to be happy. If they're sad, I want to comfort them. I want them to have these beautiful, fun experiences and to find joy. And think about if we could get to a place where we loved ourselves in that way. And so the goal is like, the more you love yourself, the more you cultivate self-love. And I know it takes time, and I know it can be challenging in the culture we live in today. But the more we cultivate self-love, the less tactical self-care has to be, because the choices are really natural. And I think that that's the same thing in terms of feeling like, oh, I'm in this rut, I'm in this situation. I think it's focus your energy on where you're going and where you want to be. Don't worry about how you're going to get there, but commit every single day to remind yourself of where you're going and that you deserve that. And slowly but surely, I think it sorts itself out.
It kind of brought to mind as well how powerful having these daily habits can also help when there's like a change in your life or a transition's coming up. Like, you basically have a foundation to get you through better than maybe if you didn't have some of these habits. And so I know a few changes are happening in your life. Model Meals was just acquired, which is so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank
then
you.
you also are going to have your first child, right? In January,
Yes.
daughter. So have you already been thinking about, okay, like with all these changes, this is what I want to do as far as like my habits or well-being, or you're just like, I'm going to flow with it when it comes? Tell me about that.
I think a little bit of both. My life is, while I do have a very robust life, I have a lot going on, I'm also very supported, and I also have a lot of flexibility. So while I do have a lot of responsibility and a lot on my plate, I also have a lot more flexibility than most people. And so there's pros and cons, like anything, and so I have an amazing assistant, for example, who, we're continuing to train so that when I take time off, she can handle those things. Right. And I guess what it comes down to is team, right. And support. I feel very supported. I have business partners in both Model Meals and Self-Care Society who are amazing. I cannot imagine running businesses by myself. I know many people do. And I run Danika Brysha Inc. as it's individually. But for me, at least in the nature of those two businesses, I'm so grateful for partnership. I'm so grateful for support. And then, having a child, this has been a long-term process for us. We actually did something called the Trimester Protocol. One of my closest friends now. She's a scientist in fertility and pregnancy and intergenerational health. And she has a program that we did for the last couple of years, which is all about preparing your body for conception, because there is so much to be said for, yes, when you're pregnant, you want to be healthy, but actually, if you want to really influence future generations, and she calls this like the most important work that you can do for our world, like the most beautiful act of service. And she lost her mother at birth. She does a lot to help with the really horrifying rates of maternal and infant death, especially in women of color. Anyway, so we did this protocol. So we've been thinking a lot about, through that, her trimester, Dr. Cleopatra's, and beyond. We've thought a lot about what it looks like for our lifestyle. And my partner, we're very lucky. We both have a lot of flexibility. He's a chef, but works for himself. And, so we have the balance. We have a probably non-traditional gender roles. He handles a lot of our lifestyle stuff that, supports me and actually being able to show up in the way that I do. So, I'm sort of talking this out. I think I'm in therapy right now as I attempt to answer your question, but I guess where it's taking me is just the active support and being willing to receive support and setting yourself up with support systems rather than trying to figure out how can I manage this on my own, realizing that the part that's that's getting us is the on my own piece. And where can we bring in support? And every time we bring in support, we give the opportunity to someone else to show up and to feel valuable and to have purpose. So while so many of us can feel overwhelmed in our lives, we forget that there's a lot of people who don't and who are looking for, they want to support, right? Like my assistant is the perfect example. She's amazing and she just loves this job. And I love her. Like she's so great and she's just perfect. Like it's just, and she was a mostly stay-at-home mom of 3 girls for a long time. And like what a gift. Like what a gift, because we get to come together. She uses her strengths and does something she loves. I feel so supported. And, it's beautiful. And so I think there are the opportunity, like the synergy is out there, and it's really easy to only see the world from our lens of like, I'm so busy, I'm so stressed out, I'm so burnt out, instead of saying, actually, there's so many people out there who really want to support and they're not feeling like that. And they're feeling like they really want to be part of something. So support, I guess, is where I got with that question.
It's such a good reminder, and one that I often have to remind myself of as well, because I often don't realize that I'm trying to do it alone until I'm like, wait, I just asked my husband to help with this and he was totally fine with it. I'm like, why don't I ask more often when I'm feeling overwhelmed? And it's almost like a habit to get out of. And like you were saying, a perspective shift of like, you don't have to think of it as like a bad thing, but like a good thing for everyone involved. And it's great. And that brings me to self-care society. I feel like in the spiritual aspect of life, a lot of people don't have support, don't have a safe space to go to explore or heal or develop. And I would love if you could give a picture to someone listening of what it's like. Because right now it's probably like, okay, classes for spirituality, but what does that mean? What does that look like? And then I would love to also know your vision for self-care society. Like, where are you going from here? What impact do you ultimately want to create?
Yeah. So self-care society is I think the best way we say like, it's like the Peloton for self-care. But if that doesn't mean anything to you, that's okay. It's essentially, it's a membership. It's a community. So it's a private community, and you get just like an unlimited membership. And we have live classes Monday through Friday, and they're all taught by various, essentially life coaches, but people who specialize in different things like self-love and confidence, or, some people who are therapists and work marriage and family therapy, all those sorts of things. And we have this amazing group of guides, and all the classes are 30 minutes. So you can attend multiple live 30-minute classes. It's only 30 minutes. During the week. And then they're all on demand as well. So if you can't attend live, and it's very cool because when you're in class, you're not visible or audible, which is really nice. Like you get to show up in your pajamas, in bed, whatever. No one sees you or hears you, but we're really engaged in the chat, and the chat is where everyone shares. And it's pretty amazing to see how vulnerable people are willing to be. And through that practice of vulnerability, and through that practice of sharing and introspection, everyone is a guide, meaning like everyone who shows up to class, especially live, we learn something from each of them. And then people can come on and volunteer if they want. But the whole premise of class is usually like we start with a quote, and then we have 4 to 5 activities: journaling, breath work, affirmations, manifestation, space, whatever it is. We do a few different activities. You just bring a journal or whatever you like to take notes on. And then we wrap it up with a self-care checklist that says, okay, here's the little boxes that we get to check. And then you can go into the community. There's a digital self-care checklist. There's a lot of different like circles we have. So circles around, healing relationship with food and body, around manifestation, around, all the different things. And then we do different workshops and that sort of stuff. I teach a monthly workshop that's like everyone's favorite of what we do, which is a strategy session. And at the end of every month, we take a 90-minute workshop to reflect on the month we're wrapping up, and like really get intentional about where we're going in the next month, how we want to show up as a person, how we want to care for ourselves, what our goals are. And so it helps bring that work, the work that a lot of people do in like January, like when they get a new year and they have that fresh start. This is how we actually integrate that sort of work over a full year. And that's really what it is, because it's a daily practice. So it's amazing. And some of the friendships that I've seen, we really aim to create authentic friendships for people, real connections. And the testimonials that we're getting, a lot of people have been in it now for over a year since we launched. And just, I had a call with one of our members yesterday, and she was just crying on the phone. She was like, I can't even express to you how this has impacted my life. Like, we have to skip. So to answer your question about my vision for it, I mean, it's to continue to make it really accessible for people. It is to continue to provide ways to do this work that feels accessible and that feels empowering. Not everyone has access to individual therapy or working with an individual coach, right? And so this is a way that I think, while it's absolutely not therapy, and I'm not suggesting that it is a way to really nurture our mental health. And the classes are all about finding your own answer. So it's not like you're showing up and I'm teaching you a lesson on habit change, right? You're going to get little snippets of that, but we're really it's work, it's exercises that help you discover your answers. And so we're just continuing to grow it. We're going to shift it over to be a little bit more app-based. I'm sure we'll continue to bring in more guides, more class content, all of that. And one of the biggest things is we're going to shift to I want to bring in more of the tool that I use to actually manage my day-to-day in terms of my self-care checklist today. Because for me, delegating to technology and putting all of the habits, the little habits, letting the light in, right? Schedule myself lovingly, flossing my teeth, all these little habits that make up my day that are important and add up. I have them on a checklist and they just repeat each day and I check them. And for me, that works. It's not for everyone, but we're building out a tool that really helps you to track your habit changes, these micro habits in an intentional way, and help you actually stay accountable. So it's all integration, right? We know what to do. I'm not reinventing the wheel. We know meditation, sleep, movement, hydration, like these things, we know. How do we integrate them? How do we actually make sure we're doing them every day? And so that's what we're really building, is a system for integration with community and where people feel safe and inspired and have permission to dream. That's a big thing that we hear a lot, is like self-care society's given me permission to dream and to actually believe that I can have these things that I want for myself.
It's so powerful to help people to dream again. And I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but that's seriously I just felt everything. And it's that freedom is just unreal. And that's amazing. And going back to the checklist though, I'm so glad that that's helped you a lot, because I track my daily micro habits as well in my planner, my Ponder Lily planner. There's a habit section. It has little check boxes. And so there's a few things that I'm if I see even just 4 out of the 5 boxes checked, I feel so good about my day. And then there's some weeks where hardly any of it's checked. And I'm oh, interesting. I wonder what was going on or why I didn't stay on top of those habits. And how did I feel? Oh, I didn't feel as great. Okay. So let's get back on those next week. And so I can be critical on myself and perfectionist leaning. I've been a lot better about it. But if someone were to try this checklist, how did you stay away from shame or judgment? How did you make it feel good to do it and not just oh, you didn't do this, so you're wrong for not doing your habits or whatnot?
Yeah. And, I love this question, and it's a really important question. And I think the answer is not so clear cut, because I think it's a combination of self-love and learning self-love and gentleness and permission over time. Right. And I think that that's something that you just kind of practice, because I can absolutely relate. It used to be oh, I didn't get all these things done and I failed and whatever. Now, if I didn't get it done, I'm oh, okay, that's cool. Maybe next week, or I didn't have time today or whatever, So I will say it's I don't know that with the specific answer for that, right? I do think it's a practice. It's cultivating more self-love and gentleness, which, we do a lot in self-care society, is permission. It's not about achieving. It's not about hitting your goals. It's about, finding self-love at this space and growing from there, because you deserve to live the life that you dream of. But one thing that I think does really help is, I guess a couple things. So one is that when you're building your first self-care checklist, I always encourage people to just build it of things they're already doing. So add nothing new to it. And even if it's the smallest thing, get out of bed or, brush your teeth, take a shower, get some sun on your face. If that's your checklist, do that and check those off for, a month, and then add one little thing for the next month and one little thing. And you just have to do it gradually. If we change everything at once, we change nothing. There's no point in trying to be okay, I'm revamping my whole life and this is what it's going to be. It's just not realistic. I also use my self-care checklist in conjunction with my calendar, because it's really easy to overestimate the amount of time we have in the day And so I also schedule out my calendar in a way that, in bigger time blocks of just like self-care and these things that I know are incredibly important to really say yes and no to what I commit to so that I can keep my self-care supported. So I know that if I say yes to this commitment, I'm sacrificing on sleep that night. And sometimes it's worth it. Doesn't mean it's not, right? But sometimes it's worth it. But for the most part, it's making decisions based on what's, really important to me. And I think your values change over time as you begin to cultivate more self-love and self-gentleness. And you can allow yourself permission to say, hey, you know what? I'm really tired today. I don't feel like checking any of these boxes. I don't want to look at my computer or my device. Cool. I'll deal with it tomorrow. And I just have permission.
And I want to reiterate some of the things that you said just now that were super powerful, just about the fact that achievement isn't the goal here. So that's one that I got. And then also we're creating a life system. So this isn't going to be a one and done type thing. This isn't going to be like in 2 weeks, I'm going to have all these habits down and I'll never have to think about it again. So I feel like that actually changed a lot for me as well. The moment I was like, okay, this is not about achievement and like purpose driven, like action, masculine energy. This is just living a good life in this moment, reflecting. It's like a self-awareness thing. And then also creating a foundation and system that I can fall back on when things get rough, or even when I want to feel better. Because again, going to Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about how important your systems are. And like you literally fall to the level of your systems when things get hard. And so what are those systems? And if you have a good foundation, oh my gosh, life is going to feel so much better than without it. And so I think just keeping that perspective that this is like a lifestyle and not an achievement or like a one and done type thing.
A system is self-care. Having a system is an act of self-care because I don't have to remember things. I don't have to stress I'm going to forget stuff. I know all the little pieces of my life that keeps me really grounded, and life feels more even keeled all the time because I always use the example of the three little pigs. It's like, what are you building your house with? Because anything can come along. I don't know, a global pandemic, right? Like anything can come along. But if your foundation is sturdy, if you've chosen to build your house, aka you, with materials and a foundation that is reliable, then no matter what comes along, you're going to handle it. You might shake in the wind a little bit, right? It's not like it's not going to affect you, but there's very little these days that impacts me, like meaning like negatively, like that kicks me off my wagon, right? How many times you hear people say, I fell off the wagon. And that's just a long-term gift of these practices. It's not going to come overnight. Like my food healing journey, my body healing journey. I mean, I was severely bulimic. I was throwing up 7-8 times a day. Like I was doing a bunch of cocaine and, I was not in a good place. And it takes time. Obviously it's not like it's happened overnight, but it's pretty incredible what can transpire with these small changes over time.
Yeah, it's such an amazing, incredible journey that you've lived. And like an example that you said is just wonderful. And it reminds me of this term anti-fragile. I started reading this book. I forgot the author's name, but it's called Anti-Fragile. And he talks about how if you look at the earth as a whole, right, like it's been around for millions, millions and millions of years. And it's because when adversity comes, it's able to become stronger from it. And you can look at other things in the world that have survived because they become stronger through adversity. And I feel like having these systems and like having these micro habits helps you become resilient because you can better become stronger from adversity. I don't know if that resonates.
1,000%. I mean, I think we do a lot of work around that in Self-Care Society too, is like, what have you been through? And here's the thing, we don't have to have this big traumatic story. Like I come from plenty of privilege and, it's like we all have things, but I do think that the challenges we go through are there for a reason, and they make our foundation stronger. And that just allows us to really be able to handle whatever comes our way.
Cool. Well, I have really enjoyed our conversation, and I always like to end interviews asking what books you're reading right now or what books you would recommend our listeners to Right.
Okay, so that's funny. So there's two parts to this because one is like I'm all into the pregnancy books right now, so that's probably boring for most people listening. So I'm reading a lot on like natural birth and pregnancy as well as how plants work because I'm really into organic gardening. But like this speaks to the period of life I'm in right now, right? Like I used to read all like self-development and personal growth and business stuff, and I still like that stuff. But I'm in this place where I'm just a lot more gentle and I'm a lot more, I give a lot more permission to just follow what lights me up. I'm taking a master gardener course right now to get certified as a master gardener. And so that's what I'm reading right now. That being said, in terms of books that have really helped me on my journey, because I do love personal development and all of that, the book Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week was a book I read early on in this journey, and that really changed my realm of possibility for the world and taking me out of this 9 to 5 for 60 years or whatever, and then retire for 50, whatever it is. Just showed me other possibilities. So that book was really helpful. The book by Melissa Urban from Whole30 called It Starts With Food is very much about food, but had I not changed what I ate, I wouldn't be here. I believe deeply sleep and food. Like it's really hard when you're feeling crappy and you have brain fog and you aren't motivated and you can't focus. Like good luck trying to read one of these books and take a lot away from it. So I really believe the physical foundation has to be there first. So It Starts With Food is really big. Danielle Laporte has a book called The Fire Starter Sessions, which I absolutely love. I think that's really great if you're kind of looking for your passion and what's next for you. And then one of my favorite books of all time is A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. More spiritual, but it's one of those things that every time I read it, it's like, oh, I hear something new. And then for anyone struggling with food and body, the book Women, Food, and God by Janine Roth really helped me make progress in my healing journey around food as well.
Okay, gardening, easier than you expected or harder than you expected?
Well, I live in Las Vegas and our summers are like, 115, 118. So that was like a big learning lesson. For the most part, easier. I mean, it's so rewarding. And I think I'm in front of a screen a lot of the day. And for me to get out in nature is like the self-care element right now that I'm realizing is so powerful. And then you start learning about the vitamin D deficiency across our world and how important that is. And no wonder, getting your hands in the dirt and growing, I love food. My partner's a chef. I own a food business and, there's just so much to it. So I love it. I think it's easy to learn. I think that everyone should, even if it's like little herbs on your windowsill or something, I think it's really a skill set and tool that is incredibly beneficial. And just, there's so many life lessons in gardening too. Just like the way the idea that if a plant isn't thriving, it's due to the environment, the soil, the weather, like all these different factors. It's not the plant's fault if it's not thriving. It's the environment's fault. And we're the same, right? Like humans are the same. It's not your fault if you're not thriving. It doesn't mean you're damaged. It means that your environment and your resources and what you're surrounded in, like, companion plants and how they support each other. Like, it's so fascinating. And it totally parallels the human personal growth development cycle. So it's been really interesting.
So does that book talk about this? Because I need to get it ASAP.
Okay. These are, you know what? If I ever write a book on gardening in many years, that's what it's going to be about. Because no, these are like straight up gardening books, but they're just lessons that I've learned with like my hands in the dirt.
That's amazing. Wow. How insightful. That's incredible. It's like, I'm looking at my dead plants right now and I'm like, crap, I need to create a better environment for them. Those poor things.
It's okay. I've killed so many plants. It took me many, many years to even keep house plants alive. And then you start learning, and what it is and probably most of your listeners too can relate to this, is like trying too hard. You're probably killing your plant because you're trying too hard. And in my life, if I'm ever like, if something's not working, it's because I just try way the hell too hard. I just need to chill.
Amen. Amen to that. Oh my goodness. I love that.
So stop watering it.
Yeah. Stop trying so hard. I feel like that's like my whole life. Well, thank you, Danika, so much. If everyone, we're going to link everything, but if people want to connect with you, find you, where can they do that?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Danika Brysha, just my name. So I'm there not as often as I used to be. Again, my sort of values and time has changed, but I'm on Instagram. That's like where I am for sure the most. Model meals, I still am the CEO, still run the company. We're actually expanding nationally in the next like 2 weeks. So probably by the time you're hearing this, we have national expansion. So if you're any of the 50 states, you can get our meals. They're all paleo, Whole30, organic, sustainably sourced, all that good stuff. That's at Model Meals on Instagram and modelmeals.com. And then Self-Care Society, we offer a free trial. So if you're interested, you can go to myselfcaresociety.com, or you can find us on Instagram at Self-Care Society, and you can check out what we're doing, or you can just take a one-off class. If you just want to try out a class, you can do that too. So.
Great. Thank you so much. And is there any like last word of wisdom or like one thing you hope someone walks away from this learning?
Yeah, that we don't have our dreams and desires for no reason. Like if there's something that's exciting you, if there's something that's lighting up, if there's something that's pulling you, you have it for a reason. And to not ignore that. And that your life's path, you're looking for what's next for you. Look at where you've been. Like, what do you know more about than some other people? Like, what lights you up? What excites you? And I really believe that if all of us were to actually follow and honor what lights us up and excites us, that the world would work perfectly. And I know it's not set up for that now. I know that all the consumer there's so much to it, but to follow what lights us up and to trust ourselves, and that we really can trust ourselves, and to continue that practice of going inward for answers, and to all the time try it. Like try trusting that, try following that, try pausing and listening to that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now it's time for an affirmation. I expand in abundance and joy every time I do the simple things that support a healthier me.
If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.